Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Alors, je vais appeler les intervenants de cette table ronde.
So I'd like to ask the various speakers to come here to the podium and join me. Gilbert Pitance will be with us, Marc, Zingraff, Bernd Vogler, Raphael Thilo will be with us, and Pascal Arimont. And we will also be joined by the Vice President of the Saarland region, Anke Rehlinger, who will be joining us online.
Je vous en prie, prenez place.
Please take your seat. My name is Jean-Baptiste Cousin. I work for the Grand Est region. I'm the director of the executive summit of the greater region, and for 1 hour and 15 minutes we will be talking about hydrogen challenges within a territory that you may not be familiar with. It is called the greater region. This is a cooperation area made up of Wallonia, Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, Rhenania-Westphalia, Lorraine, and as well as the Saarland region. The Saarland region back in 2018 and 2019 chaired this network, and during the French presidency of 2021-2022, we will try to improve the way territories work in order to speed up transition to lower carbon local areas. It is my pleasure today to be joined by Anke Rehlinger. Good afternoon, Mrs. Rehlinger, and welcome to our session. You were elected just a few weeks ago, and I'd like to hand over to you, Mrs. Rehlinger, and you will tell us more about the hydrogen approach in your region. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me at this conference. Dear participants, the greater region is a pilot region for hydrogen in Europe, ? This is the title of the session, and practically there are 3 to 4 questions that we need to give a reply to. Does the greater region want to remain a pioneer in the field? Does it have the ability to do so? That's the second question. And thirdly, if we are convinced that we are a pioneer in the field, what do we need to do to continue the work? As to the first 2 questions, my answer is yes. We want to remain a pioneer in the field, and we do think that we have the ability to do so. We have the right network of partners, and the greater region recently has worked in even closer cooperation with its partners. I think that this cooperation is key for the future of our region, and I know that there are in the audience many experts in the field of hydrogen, and hydrogen will help us move towards a carbon neutral society, and will help us move towards a carbon neutral industry. So there are things that have to be done to make this transition. We can, of course, we have paved the way, but we will now need to define the way we are going to meet our objectives in terms of standards of living, and we should of course avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. We need to fight against climate change, and again, hydrogen will help us in achieving this objective. Of course, the industries need to be safeguarded, and hydrogen has many applications in the field of mobility, for instance. It is also very helpful in the in many industrial activities, steel making being one of them. The Saarland region the Saarland's region economy relied a lot on steel and coal. Saarland wouldn't be where it is now without steel and coal. Now, coal is not part of our future, but we want to continue being leaders in the steel making industry, and hence the need for hydrogen. We do not want the steel industry to be under the same pressure as it was in the past. Let me remind you of the too many negotiations about trade barriers, custom tariffs. But of course, this has to be reconciled with the more climate-friendly objectives. So what we want in a nutshell is green steel. And hydrogen can have applications in the green steel making industry. It offers many opportunities for the steel making industry, but we also need to help this industry remain competitive. Infrastructures, production. There is no production currently, but when there will be production, this production will need to guarantee the profitability of our industries. So, of course, competitiveness does not come into play when it comes to climate and climate change mitigation. So what will be of the utmost importance are the European projects, the cross-border projects. Very hands-on projects are necessary. You know, today old pipelines are no longer used, and they have given way to new models of distributions that can be applied to the steel making industry. So we need to develop a hydrogen transport network. So green power is necessary, but Germany cannot do it alone. We need solar energy in the south of Europe. We need wind energy in the north of Europe to help us transport hydrogen. And in the meantime, we will need to discuss the color of hydrogen. But the war in Ukraine does not make the debates around the issue easy, and we know that gas supply it's very unstable. So we must pursue the work, this massive work with all the partners for the sake of our greater region. The Mosaic project, the GT gas project, and many more are cross-border projects that will help us build the hydrogen network on both sides of the border. And then the electricity price the price of electricity will define in a way and set the price of hydrogen, and it will certainly lead to the creation of many jobs. So I'm very grateful for this conference and for you addressing the topic. What are the opportunities that we can offer to our region? What are the achievements to come up with in the field of hydrogen? And I am confident that the debate will be very fruitful, and that this conference will lead to very hands-on projects. Hydrogen has a cross-border dimension. It is part of our region's future, and it will also serve the interests of our populations. Let me conclude by saying good luck and good work. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, dear Minister, President of Saarland. Now we will be moving to the west. We have with us Gilbert Pitance, General Delegate of the Plastic Cluster of the Eastern Region. You work on integrated approaches to integrate hydrogen in the dimension of your work. So could you please tell us more about this local approach?
Voilà. Donc ici, l'organisation que je représente, le PPE.
So I represent an organization who's in charge of paving the way of the hydrogen sector. A coal plant was stopped on March 31st of this year. After the closing of the plant, we launched a project that was signed by the Minister of Environment, and the hydrogen dimension of the project is quite relevant. And I'd like to say a few words about this project. So John Cockrell, H2V, Hydrogen de France, many hydrogen players are clustered around this project that has to do with production, storage, and transport. So why did we launch a hydrogen sector after the closing of the coal plant? Well, my territory, Moselle and Lorraine, has always been a pioneer of steel making, and Sarreguemines was the cradle of earthenware. So we have launched a think tank made up of several players, state players, private players, hydrogen customers or potential hydrogen customers in the field of transport, steel making, and chemistry. And we came to the conclusion that it was possible to envisage a consumption of 300 megawatts of electrolysis within 2050 based on heavy mobility, public transport mobility, and the trucks corridor crossing the region. The Saarland steelmaking industry needs hydrogen in order for this industry to be greener, and hydrogen plays a key role in the steelmaking industry. It produces energy and it compensates for the greenhouse gas emission of iron. So we need to speed up the process, as it has been said many times. And by reusing existing infrastructures, we can indeed save money. So we will reuse the gas pipelines of Moselle to transform it into an cross-border hydrogen transport distribution center, and we can use the former coal plant that used to produce many megawatts of power, and we can turn this ecosystem into something greener in a very fast manner. So why producing in Lorraine and consuming in the Saarland region? Now, these two regions have always worked together. They have always been active in the coal industry. They have a common infrastructure. They've always worked with a very collaborative mindset. There are water pipelines, gas pipelines that are available in both regions, and this is, of course, this will help setting the basis of this ecosystem. So we are active in the steelmaking industry, we were active in the coal industry. The coal industry is over, and it will the region will shift and to hydrogen industry. Now, of course, there are no visible borders between the two regions. There are no industrial borders either. So I would say, let's think about a European approach to make this European project come true and to make it similar to what the steel and coal community did some 60 years ago. Many companies have joined forces in this project, and I think that with the University of Lorraine, we have been thinking about creating new skills and new know-how in the field of hydrogen. The idea would be to, in a way, adjust, or rather than creating new jobs, adjust the current jobs. We will launch a university certificate on hydrogen skills, and we will launch another project on future skills and future trades, and we have answered a call for tenders on these two activities that we try to develop with the Saarland region. Thank you very much for this very enlightening contribution, and I think that indeed your industrial cluster is in the right position to embark on the transition towards hydrogen. So I will now give the floor to Marc Zingraff, who's the Vice President of the International Relations Commission of the Grand Est region. He's also the first Vice President of the Sarreguemines Confluences organization. You are an expert in experimenting with hydrogen. So let me give you the floor to say a few words about your project. So, as Gilbert, I came here to give testimony about our project. So as a regional advisor and vice president of the Commission in charge of cross-border issues, I suggest to look at hydrogen from a local point of view. From the point of view of logistics companies, 70% of companies and employment in the suburban areas of Sarreguemines are occupied by German inhabitants. Sarreguemines is a city of 22,000 inhabitants, and very early we have looked into the issue of eco-responsibility. It started 20 years ago. We started a reflection over fuel cell and over what we can do to be better in eco-responsibility. We launched climate plans, climate projects, and we noted shortcomings, many shortcomings, and we tried to suggest the best possible technologies to fix these shortcomings. So we did not immediately look into hydrogen, but we look at the electric energy. We inaugurated PV plants, solar plants. In terms of mobility, we have looked into hydrogen and we replied to a European call for tenders. We were short-listed along with other partners, donors and universities, and our consortium was in charge of launching the Fayence project, the earthenware project that produces green hydrogen. This is a free of charge hydrogen filling station. The project extended from 2015 until 2020. It no longer exists since 2020, but we decided to pursue the project because companies, customers are now properly equipped, and telling those people that the project was coming to a stop put us into trouble. So we decided to continue the project. Now, this is what makes the experiment quite interesting. Technologies are moving fast, and we needed to support these technologies. I think that this morning someone said we needed to retrofit pipelines. Perhaps we also need to retrofit these pilot filling stations. Because they can be made operational quite easily with low investments. Our philosophy has always relied on the locally sourced products. We talked about vehicles and mobility. We have French, German, Dutch customers, because, well, the roads in our region are roads that are taken by Belgian people, Dutch people, German people. So yes, it would be quite useful to retrofit vehicles. These technologies for the station installation for any hydrogen vehicle that we have. When these vehicles break down, they need to be fixed outside of our region, and this generates many issues. There is no one in the region that can help us fix these vehicles. Of course, this requires resources, financial means, labor. Now the station is not new. We are required to build stations, but it requires a lot of work and a lot of money. And then the locally sourced products sometimes punish us in a way, because, well, thinking locally and acting globally is in a way our motto. And the decisions that I take for the city, of course, will have an impact on all the inhabitants. So it is quite complex, and we felt a bit lonely, and that's why we sought a partner, someone who would help us manage the project. And we identified the Moby partner in the eastern part of France. They wanted to tap into their experience and their network. They also wanted to do training and pilot projects with the university. We were talking about the skills that are required. And this company, Moby, suggests to open 15 charging or filling stations in both in France, but also in countries abroad. And I think that together we could do something very useful. Now, in conclusion, let me just say that we need the local authorities, we need to work hand in hand with local players, and the local authorities and the municipalities can more easily than other players alleviate the fears of citizens. And in June 17 in Metz, we will have a large roundtable on the technical skills and other types of skills that will be needed, because I think the role of municipalities is quite key.
Thank you very much. Let's now move on to a different scale. We're going to move to the northeast between, so near Rhineland-Palatinate. We have with us Bernd Vogler. You are in charge of the Chemical Associations of Rhineland-Palatinate, and you are, because of that, one of the pioneers in terms of hydrogen within your land. So I would like for you to explain, if you don't mind, what is the maturity of the hydrogen strategy in Rhineland-Palatinate. I'd like to know how your land deals with the hydrogen strategy within European corridors. I'd like to know how you perceive what it means for you to be backed up by the greater region. Thank you very much.
Be here and talk with you because it's such a huge task we are facing, especially as the chemical industry. And now is the time to set the way and do it in the right way and not in the wrong way. The major problem I see, I look at many projects, super projects, but I see less of the overall picture, of the overall figures, of the overall need of energy, of hydrogen, of electricity, and that's sad. And that was one driver of the study we were doing with our climate ministry in Rhineland-Palatinate. It's not published yet, so I can't go into depth, but yeah, it's trying to provide the figure for Rhineland-Palatinate and for the input we need. And I've find it crucial to look at the figures. They are huge. We are talking about 1 million tons of hydrogen the chemical industry is using at the moment in Germany. And we are using it, yes, as a material source. We don't burn it. We use it as material input. And we estimate this figure, this 1 million tons, it will go up by the factor of 7. We heard today in the morning, the Commission is calculating with 10 million tons, 7 only in Germany. I think it's not enough. A last figure, the whole energy needed by the industry in my state, in Rhineland-Palatinate, is roughly about 40 terawatt hours of energy. And I estimate we would need the same or more in hydrogen and in renewable electricity. So we are talking about hundreds terawatt hours. This is huge. And if you look at the scale, then it's clear we can't make it locally. I always hear in my state, yes, we've got decentralization, we make it there where the energy is needed. If you look at 100 terawatt hours, we need everything what is done locally, but it is not enough, by far not enough. And I'm really glad, I hear it seldom, but here it was stated, I would say 70 or 80% of our hydrogen has to be imported. And that's the huge, the enormous task, and we have to start now. Yeah, I will keep it short. These were my key points, and it's clear that we are not only looking at pipelines from the north, we are also looking at pipelines coming here from the Grande Région. Oui, c'est clair. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup pour cette introduction. Et donc, je vous propose maintenant que nous...
Thank you very much for this introduction. We shall now switch perspectives and turn to an industrialist from Wallonia, so John Cockerill. So you are a solution provider, you're acting and offering solutions at a European scale. You're very committed to several projects dealing with the greater region. So I'd like for you to explain a little bit about what the solutions are that are available with John Cockerill. And I'd like to know what your strategy is to support this transition, this energy transition approach. Thank you very much. Thank you also for the invitation extended to me to participate in this important event. Indeed, John Cockerill, we're an EOM, we supply solutions. We're French and Belgian. We have a headquarter in Belgium, but we have 2,000 employees in France, same as in Belgium, and we have 20 facilities in France. So we have been, in hydrogen today, we're the #1 producer of electrolyzers in the world. So in 2021, we were the point of origin of 30% of electrolyzers globally. So beyond electrolyzers, so equipment to produce green hydrogen, we're also developing mobility solutions. This greater region, we've been working with it quite a lot. We know it well. We've been founding members of it. It was said by Mr. Pitance, we are founding members of Dynamise. So we're very involved in R&D with several stakeholders in Wallonia and in the Grand Est with Metz University and Lorraine University. But beyond that, we have announced a while ago now the construction of an electrolyzer plant in Alsace, in Aspach. The construction has started already, and the idea is to convert an existing John Cockerill facility to turn it into the first gigafactory on the continent. The idea being to produce more than 1,000 megawatts per year of equipment and of electrolyzers. So the components, the spare parts will be manufactured in Alsace, and the electrolyzers will be assembled in Saarland near Liège in Wallonia. So we will create about 250 direct jobs in Alsace, and it will be open next year. It will be the first gigafactory functioning in Europe. So this project, we have announced it a while ago, and we decided to invest in it solidly a couple of months ago. We received a pre-notification by France and Wallonia within the framework of the IPCEI program of European subvention or subsidies. That was 2 years ago. So we were candidates 2 years ago, then we got pre-notification. We know that our expenses could be paid back. We were very happy to be part of the 16 last projects that were announced by Bruno Le Maire on the French side, but we had to take some risks. We had to get a head start before the final notification because the deadline still, everything takes so long. I mean, it took 2 years for us to be pre-notified. We all know that we need to accelerate. For an industrialist such as ourselves, we need to anticipate investments. We know that European ambitions are huge. They doubled a month ago after a decision by the Commission. We are now talking about 10 million tons of green hydrogen on the continents, plus 10 million tons in friendly countries that will export to Europe. So we're speaking about 200 to 3,000 megawatt of electrolyzers. We need to anticipate mechanisms, and it will be necessary to obtain financial support. Europe has a real opportunity to seize. France and Belgium do that too. We need to build tomorrow's champions for that sector. Our ambition is to have 10,000 megawatts of production capacity by 2035. So we want to build European equipment for Europe based on 100% European technology. European stakeholders, of which we are one, have the opportunity to be real pioneers and to be present on the North American market, in Asia. We can export our know-how to those countries. And to show you how quickly things are going, in our teams we hired 140 people in Wallonia and in France. Those are very high value-added jobs for the past 15 months. So I'm talking R&D, manufacturing, sales force, exports, so 140 positions. So it's very dynamic. We're really convinced that it's going to work, and we're really present in that greater region between Wallonia, Grand Est in France, and of course the west regions of Germany. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. You mentioned, you broached the risks taken by industrial stakeholders. We spoke of IPCEI, we spoke of the European funding mechanisms. We have with us also Pascal Arimont, who's a European MP. You know very well, you know, what's at stake from an industrial and environmental perspective, but also from a structural policy perspective. And I would be really happy to hear you explain a little bit, you know, what's the point of view coming from the European Parliament? What are the perspectives, and how can the EU support territories in this energy transition approach through hydrogen or with hydrogen? Thank you very much for your invitation. I will indeed speak German. I'm the only one on the panel speaking German, but I'm part of the German-speaking part of Belgium. We don't have that many people coming from that region, but I am a German speaker. Thank you very much. So the magical question here is, can we actually manage to turn this future-facing technology, can we turn it into something that is able to change or to mitigate climate change, but also to create jobs? We've been thinking about this question for 2.5 to 3 years now. Every day this question has been discussed in the European Parliament. Mrs. von der Leyen spoke of the new Green Deal. She decided to also put her money where her mouth is, I suppose. We have like 16 actual law texts within the Green Deal, texts that entail numbers as well, with clear deadlines and a clear strategy. I absolutely agree with Mr. Vogler. We have to determine exactly what we're talking about. I think this is probably the main obstacle. We can write and draft wonderful laws. We can do a lot of things, but that has to work out. And I think this is the main obstacle. I want to give you some numbers from Belgium, because I know the Belgium numbers very well. Our main energy consumption is 460 terawatts in Belgium. 460. And out of those, we produce 81 terawatt. So only 16 of those terawatts come from renewables. So we started with 460 overall consumption and reached 16. Our plans for Belgium and what the Commission is indicating is that we need 200 to 230 terawatt hours of renewable energy within the next 20 years. So we need to see an increase from 16 to 230 terawatt hours. For a small country like Belgium, it's going to be hard, nigh impossible, in fact. Another interesting number within the context of hydrogen, as Mr. Vogler said, hydrogen, currently, we produce 1 million tons of hydrogen in Europe. In total, we use 300 million tons of gas in Europe. So 300 versus 1, that's another big challenge. And the Commission has just determined that we had to achieve 10 million within the next 10 years. So we need to move from 1 million to 10 millions. And we will still be quite far away from the 300 millions that we will not be able to reach. So either we'll have to, of course, we'll have to also think about reducing our consumption. We'll have to be more economical. Those are huge volumes that we want to replace with hydrogen. It's a good thing to start. It's a good thing to engage on that path, but we really need all the projects we heard about today. And without those European goals, we would have no investors. So it's very important for Europe to establish, goals and to determine where we want to go, so that the industry can have some degree of confidence and really commit to it. Researchers, scientists developing technologies and techniques are there to make it possible for Europe to keep its head start. So it's important, and we're all working on creating the right framework, and we hope within the Parliament that together with the Council we can establish a framework that will be solid enough to last us 20-30 years. There will be some need of flexibility, but at least the industry would have some degree of certainty, would have a goal based on which it could orient itself. So thinking about producing, even if we produce 10 million tons, and if we import a lot as well, what happens to the rest? We need to create a market, and that is the key question. How can we create such a market? We need to find people who use those products, but no one can use the products if they are too expensive. And so it's a bit of a cycle, and I've had to negotiate to have a text regarding the fact that if thermal engines are forbidden in 2035 or not. I used to be quite naive, and I thought that we would be able to create hydrogen-based or hydrogen-fueled vehicles to create that market. The Commission tells me now that it's not possible. It's not possible because we do not have enough renewables available. We will first need to give hydrogen to the industry, then maybe a little bit could be available for traffic or transportation, if any remains. And that is what's at stake here. This is the challenge. The magic bullet is as follows. We cannot produce it all in Europe. We don't have enough wind or sun compared to other regions in the world. And also, and that's very important, as Europeans, as the European Union, we must take matters in our own hands to create or to sign contracts with third-party countries. For now, a lot of people are going to Qatar or elsewhere to sign contracts. And now it's important that the European Union should do that as a single entity, because it will give us much better negotiation, bargaining positions, and it will make it possible to develop a uniform, harmonized strategy for all countries. And our strength of negotiation will be much bigger as well. We have the Chinese, the Americans, the Indians, the US Americans fighting for the same market. If Belgium goes to Mauritania and says, we'd like to purchase a little bit of hydrogen, it's not going to work very well. If the EU goes and does the same in the name of all 27 member states, that will be a very different deal that we're looking at. So we must really work hand in hand. And I'd like to also agree with what's been said already. We need to accelerate. Whatever is already available needs to be accelerated. For that, we'll need new techniques. So we will admit all possible techniques, and the most efficient technique is the one that will win out. It's nearly automatic. And if we make that possible, then we will also need to, give permits much faster to project bearers. It would be good if the Commission could communicate really quickly and say, go, you can go. You have a green light, go and go fast. But there we hit a wall due to, regulations and regulations regarding access to state aid. In that respect, we do need some degree of flexibility. We are here talking about an industry that does not yet exist, an industry that we need to develop, because there is, climate change is an emergency. It makes it necessary for us to act fast, which is why we need more flexibility, accelerated procedures, faster tracks, so that companies and entrepreneurs, same as John Cockrell, for example, can become or maintain their leadership position regarding electrolyzers. If we can do that, if we can simplify their lives, then Europe can create an industry that does not yet exist, and it is the only possible future for Europe. So, yes. Europe can help fight climate change, but it is also quite certain that we will be technological leaders as well. And that will be what saves our industry. So we will have kind of a double victory, really. So but for that, we must really take matters within our own hands. As the European Parliament, we are trying to adopt texts really quickly. Normally, it should take 3 to 4 years, but in fact, now we're trying to adopt 16 texts within the space of a year. But then things need to also be implemented and work. So the question is, can we create that market? And if we can, then we will have all the assets we need, and it could be a European project, but for that to happen, we must really work very hard. The industry needs to be innovative, we need to take risks, but if we do that, then we will be rewarded for it. Thank you very much for this clarification. We do see, there are many things at stake that are mentioned and dealt with at different scales. Starting at the local level and moving up and on to a global approach via also regional and macro-regional approaches. We had a wonderful example of different combinations of scales, and I think from the general public, probably there are a lot of questions and a lot of question marks. So I will leave the floor to the room if anybody has actual questions for our speakers. Is there anybody who would like to take the floor and ask a question of our panelists?
Gaëtan.
Gaëtan. Is it working? Yes, perfect. Thank you very much. So to start with, I'd like to get back to what Mr. Thilo was saying for John Cockrell. We had a presentation by the European Commission to really step it up as far as electrolyzers development is concerned. Do you believe that we're on the right track now, that we're going to be able to accelerate, that the industry has the ability to launch things with the support of the different DGs of the European Commission? Or do you still have doubts? in terms of the speed of action? Well, thank you very much for this question. The answer is I don't know. In fact, we'll see. What I can tell you is that we, like 2 weeks ago exactly, we were invited with our competitors. We were invited by the European Commission, and we met Thierry Breton, the commissioner. And the question or the agenda of our session was like, ladies and gentlemen, industrialists, what do you need for you to accelerate, to shift gears? You've seen our ambitions at European level. Those ambitions are very high in volumes, in equipment volumes for electrolyzers. We are counting on you. What do you need to step it up? So even as an initiative, this was quite wonderful. We had a very fruitful discussion. We signed a document that has been made public. It's a commitment between industrialists and the Commission regarding a lot of different things to facilitate and support the acceleration of the deployment of hydrogen technologies. So I do believe, and we've all noticed it, we talked about different difficulties and different obstacles, but I think the obstacles have been identified quite well. There are ideas that have emerged to try and overcome those obstacles. We'll see whether it works. It's true that it's not easy. State aid, state subsidies have to be have to have the right dimensions. There are a lot of requests. It's not easy. It's a European project, so we need to move at the same rhythm everywhere. So you always need to go only as fast or adjust your pace to the slowest one. We're on a planet. There are other continents where the ambitions are just as high, China especially, India as well. Things are moving quickly. We are number one in China as well. And in China, no one asks all those questions. In China, things go much faster. There's a real risk that in the future, champions, same as PV, will be Chinese. The leaders will all be Chinese because they don't have to have that uphill battle. So in order to support our champions, our leaders in Europe, I think maybe we need to be a little bit less timid in the potential obstacles that we set up to protect our market, to make sure that we remain independent as well. And I think that may be important for the future and for the sustainability of our economies. Thank you very much. I think it's quite interesting also to de-zoom a little bit and to take a step back and remember what our responsibilities are. Other questions? Yes, hi, hello. I'm Mathieu Anville. I work at the Plasturgie de l'Est, and I had a question regarding what Mr. Thillot said. In the value chain of green hydrogen, we all speak of electrolysis, hydrogen stations, refueling stations. We speak of green hydrogen and the European need for green hydrogen with additionality principles that can be implemented to satisfy that need. How about PV? I'd like to think locally as well. I mean, we have a factory announced near Sarreguemines with mostly at the beginning the capital was from Norway, but the ownership is Chinese, and now it's an Indian stakeholder that purchased that project. How can Europe, and I'm speaking as a citizen here, a citizen from a region that is concerned by that transition, how can Europe help out to encourage such beautiful projects like the Gigafactory to really complete the value chain for green hydrogen?
Qui souhaite apporter un éclairage? Harimo vielleicht?
Who'd like to answer? Mr. Arimont, maybe? Well, that's a difficult question because we're talking about private investment in France that has been purchased by an Indian competitor, if I'm not mistaken, if I understood everything. It's the law of the market. It's a free market. It's how it is. We do consider that it can have very positive effects in some areas, but here we're really talking about markets that have to be created and that need to be protected. At European scale, we speak quite a lot of strategies to guarantee our own autonomy. Mr. Breton is very good at defining defends the creation of sectors that need to be more independent at European level. But it doesn't yet exist, does it? So we need to create those sectors. And to my mind, this is the path that we must follow. Europe must not only protect the subsidiaries within, must not only protect the different supply chains within Europe, but we also must protect ourselves from what's coming from outside. During the pandemic, we protected some companies that were about to be purchased by Chinese or Indian stakeholders. That could have had dramatic consequences. I don't know if that's the right idea for a sector that is being born right now, but we're working now on the CBAM, which is kind of an umbrella for our external borders to try and avoid for some products that have a strategic importance, products that have been made with less renewable energies, for example, will have to pay a tax to enter the European market. This is one of the instruments that we want to set up in order to protect the European industry or the nascent European industry. So those are the types of instruments that we have to develop. Those instruments aren't yet available, but we really must try to make European industrialists' life easier, not harder. We must go much faster. We must give or grant permits much faster. And this aspect of state subsidies, we need to think about that in a much more flexible way, because we're way too slow at the moment. If we want to create a market, if we want to create an industry, we need to move lightning fast. As was said before, the Chinese are everywhere. They purchase things everywhere. They copy things everywhere. And in the end, we have good ideas, but they produce those good ideas concretely somewhere else. We need to avoid that. So it's a bad answer to your good question, but I'm just trying to, get an idea, get a sense of where we want to go. Yeah, maybe to add on what was said, and I think there's one point that is important to me, and that's the necessary speed. The projects we've mentioned, this has been going on for a year. It has gone through a lot of different things. My collectivity of Sarreguemines, we spent about 15 million euros on prep work throughout the period. And throughout the period, I've not been talking to other project bearers who are in a hurry as well, and who are doing exactly what we want them to do, i.e. going fast and making decisions. And we have to make decisions at the same pace. We need to be faster. Internationally, we can agree on a certain number of things, and then we can make the decisions that are necessary. The right aspect, the right side of that question is, we are regions that can support those projects. Grand Est is an interesting region for investors, which is great. It raises question marks. It's an encouragement as well. But I do believe that we need to go faster and to simplify things in order to become more efficient.
Je vous en prie.
Hi, my name is Brad Ladwig. I'm a professor at the University of Luxembourg. And I listened to the presentations, especially from Rhineland-Palatinate and our MEP, Mr. Arimont. I hope that in Europe we can actually aspire to do better than just keep up with the rest of the world, that we can aspire to become leading in something. Because we lost the race in solar PV. We're barely competitive with batteries. Most batteries going into automotive applications are coming from China or Korea. Maybe we compete on electrolyzers, or maybe we also get left behind on electrolyzers. So I would encourage, especially our politicians, to have an ambition to actually get us to lead instead of just to keep parity. The second thing I would say, I very much like the presentation from Mrs. Rehlinger from Saarland. I drive often past steel mills. And as an engineer, when I see these things, I see something that made us wealthy, especially in our region of Europe. But it's actually an area where we could get more wealthy, because green steel will be a very big thing. And to make green steel, you just need a lot of hydrogen. And to make a lot of hydrogen, we need a lot of green electricity. And actually, you've all addressed that already with words, but we are not on track to make sufficient quantities of green hydrogen. This wasn't addressed here. This was just the amount of green hydrogen to decarbonise or to modernise our chemical manufacturing, for example, in Rheinland-Palatinate. But actually, if we wanted to make significant quantities of green steel, we need probably another order of magnitude of green hydrogen. So, of course, it can only be satisfied by importation, and many people are aware of this. But, you know, where is the action to say, okay, you know, what's clearly been said here is we're not going to have enough green hydrogen, even just to decarbonise the chemical facility. You know, I used to live in Mannheim. I looked across the river at Ludwigshafen. Anyone that's been there would know it's a massive facility. Not everyone thinks it's beautiful, but every engineer that looks on it sees that's a massive generator of jobs and wealth for Europe. Largest single integrated chemical manufacturing facility in Europe. But it's not getting any bigger. BASF is building their new facilities in the Middle East and China. So, you know, where's the ambition to make us actually lead instead of just keep up? That's the question.
To whom?
All of the panel, all of the panel.
OK. Qui souhaite être le premier à répondre?
Who would like to answer? Yes, sir.
That's exactly the point. And I'm optimistic, but to add one more problem, we are leaders in techniques, in specialty chemicals, but to make hydrogen isn't rocket science. So we can't get here the best of the world and have a high leap in front because it's I don't want to insult anyone here, but it's not that complicated. So it won't be easy to be on the top. I know that our member companies, they are working hard and they are investing just to be in the top. There are billions going in there, but you have to see the investment in climate. It brings not a profit in the next years. It will be on the long run, but we have to withstand the next steps, the next years. And that will be the huge task. And that was the reason, because as I said, we have to make it right, because there's a big chance if we make it wrong, we fail. Thank you.
Vous voulez aussi réagir?
Would you like to give your say, sir? Yes, we talked about two things. We talked about technological sovereignty and energy independence, and we need to have a long-term vision. We are astonished to the fact that we depend on Russian gas, but if we continue having other countries producing lithium batteries instead of producing ours, then, well, we will make the same finding in the next future. So multiplying by 6 electricity production, using hydrogen means using it and putting it to good use. We need also to think about storage, but there are technical aspects to be taken into account. 55 kilowatt-hours of production requires a lot of storage. So yes, electrifying the transport sector, the industrial sector, and thinking about hydrogen when there is no other way. So if we are to develop hydrogen, we need to think about energy independence, energy self-sufficiency, but we also need to understand the yields that it can generate or not. We are number one in terms of electrolyzers, but who will be number one in the next 5 years and in the next 10 years, electrolyzers are a niche market. In 2030, the annual value of the market will be multiplied 100-fold, 200-fold, and the players of tomorrow will no longer be the players of today. So we are we have a good stance, but we need to maintain it, and we are not going to export from India to Europe. We are not going to export from China to Europe. So we will be doing European technology. Now, how can we guarantee that we will be European champions? Of course, subsidies, grants are necessary. Even if green energy is not yet competitive, if Europe is to achieve its ambitions, it needs 350,000 megawatt hours of hydrogen. And I think that electrolyzers that will be sold be supplied by European suppliers. And then the renewable energy facilities. Either we add constraints to our clients, to project developers, and we ask them for credentials, but this takes time. I used to work on wind energy. Developing a wind project takes, and an offshore wind project takes up to 7 years. Solar energy is faster. I think that we need to be faster, and we need to accept that green electron might be produced in Spain to fuel electrolyzers in Germany, and perhaps at the beginning it will not work exactly the way we want it to work. So these are just a few ideas that I think could help Europe. We have time for one very last question, if any.
I fully agree with you, Mr. Tillot, concerning, and also with you, Brad, concerning the windmills. But you know, the point is that some politicians, in particular in my country, are making very strange comments about windmills. Some of them saying, oh, should they be elected, I will try to suppress, actually, to dismantle this windmill because it's ugly. And the point is, we have to convince, is not actually to convince in a positive manner that this is some part of the energy that we need. And it's only for windmills, but also for other part of energy. And also, another things to be done still is to save energy, to improve the energy efficiency of processes. Thank you.
Monsieur Arimont, vous aurez probablement le dernier mot de ce panel.
So over to you, Mr. Arimont, for the last word. Now, if my data is correct, the French nuclear plants account for 40% of energy supply in France. So you would need to produce 60% of your primary energy with renewable energy or with other sources. So yes, France has to invest in renewable energy. Now, to produce green hydrogen, and we were talking about the hydrogen colors. I think that at the beginning we need to accept every color to open up the market, and then we can focus once the share of renewable energy increases, we can focus on green hydrogen. I live at the border with the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and Germany, and I think that we're very good at developing gas infrastructures, and we already have very sophisticated gas infrastructures, and our harbors tick all the boxes in terms of hydrogen imports. So are we going to be the next champions? I think that we have the right infrastructure. We just need to bring a few adjustments that do not require too many investments. So I think that we can modernize the infrastructure with very reasonable amounts of money. And I think that Europe is the most ambitious continent. The climate law, the climate legislation is the most ambitious legislation, with an objective of 50% or 55% of CO2 emissions reduction within 2050. If we want this dream to come true, we need to be efficient, fast, and I think that the European Commission is about to present the Repower EU program that will certainly speed up even more the process. So if we want to be the champions, we need to set clear-cut objectives supported by data and by evidence. However, we need to be realistic as well, and I think that we have already shown a great level of ambition. Thank you very much for these closing words and combining ambition and realism. I'd like to thank all the speakers. I'd like to thank the Minister President of Saarland. Short break before we resume at 4 with a new panel dedicated to transitioning from HO2 strategies to a collective endeavor.